Hi everyone, welcome to another episode in our Speed Painting Blackstone Fortress series. In this video, we'll be painting up the Crusader Gotfret de Montbard. Before you begin, you might find it a bit easier to keep his storm shield detached. This will make it easier to paint the details that are slightly obscured, so you won't have to get your brush into all those awkward angles. Holding that little shield to prime it will be quite difficult, but fortunately the larger hole is exactly the width of a cocktail stick. Snip off the end of one and jam it in the hole. It fits quite snugly, but if you want it to be a bit more secure, you can dab a tiny bit of super glue on the tip of the stick before you shove it in. Ooer.
I then primed both parts of the model black. There are a few hard to reach spots, especially behind the legs, so don't overdo it with your spray primer, otherwise you'll start to obscure detail. Be quite sparing and then go in with black paint and a brush to get all those sneaky spots. I wanted his armour to have a unique blue steel look, so we'll try something new on Gotfret. I mixed black, blue and silver paint in equal amounts, and then gave his armour and shield a heavy dry brush with this mix. I then mixed another paint, this time just silver and blue, and gave the same areas a slightly lighter dry brush with this blue metallic colour. And finally, I gave the armour a very light dry brush of pure silver, focusing on the edges as much as I could.
Guy then painted his power sword using thinned silver paint. It's better to try to keep it thin on things like blades and flat panels to stop brush strokes showing and texture building up where you don't want it. To make a nice colour contrast with the blue-tinged armour, Guy made a rich brown by mixing red and brown paint in a 1-to-1 mix and painted the robes. The hooded cloak thingamajig, is it a cassock? I mean, who cares? The fabricy parts, paint all the fabricy parts. Leave the internal lining of the fabricy thing black to keep things a bit interesting.
Once you've gone around the whole model, the place you started will probably already be dry, so give it another thin second coat to really enrich that colour. After you've painted his cape thing, grab your grey paint and colour his boots and gloves and any debris that you might have added to the base. After that, we're going to use our black paint just to make sure all the lining of his cape is actually black, because I certainly hit lots of it with our blue metallic dry brushing. And I'm also going to use a smaller brush to catch the pipes on his chest too. If you can't be bothered doing this, it'll still look good without this step, so don't worry.
Next, we'll grab our khaki tan paint to base coat some little parts of the model. There's the scroll on his hip and purity seal parchments on the sword and the shield. You could also paint the skull in the middle of the emblem on his shield too. We were originally going to leave this blue, but then changed our minds and painted it tan as well. So, moving on to the gilded trim, we mixed gold paint with yellow in equal parts to create a more ornamental, muted gold, and lightly built up a base coat on the trim by using the edge of the brush. This makes it easier than trying to use the tip to paint all the fiddly details. By tilting the brush and using the side, the brush does all the hard work for you. That's my style.
I also painted the decorative power unit on the sword, and the gilded bands on the armour, and the little dangly trinkets this muted gold colour too.
I love the word dangly.
Because there's going to be a lot of warm reds and browns, I decided to make the wax of the purity seals green instead of the usual red. I'm not just doing the old red-green colourblind thing here.
That was pretty controversial actually on the Instagram photograph, wasn't it?
By the way, follow us on Instagram at MWMinis. Good segue.
Unintentional plug.
Next, I pulled out my red paint and gave the inside of the big Inquisition symbol a coat. Don't worry too much about going into the gaps or even accidentally hitting that gold, as we can fix it up later. I also added a little dot of red on his eye sensor thing on his helmet as well. And for the final step before the wash stage, I gave all of the grey elements, so the gloves, the boots and the debris on the base, a quick dry brush with white, using a smaller brush.
So, 27 minutes of base coating down, and Gotfret is already starting to come together. If you're looking forward to seeing how this one turns out, hit that like button. If you already know how it turned out because you're not stupid and you saw the video thumbnail, hit the like button anyway.
Crack out your brown wash and give the brown, red and gold bits a quick once over with it. Careful not to let it pool too much, especially in the creases of the cape, because it might cause weird tide marks when it dries and shrinks. While you're waiting for that wash to dry, get your black paint out again and reinforce the black of the base. We'll have caught a lot of it with the dry brushing we did and painting the debris. So after letting Gotfret dry off and just over half an hour of hands-on painting time, the rough and ready speed paint is complete. As always in these videos, I'll show you a few more ways we can add more contrast and bring out a few details, but before that, a very appreciative shout out to our newest patrons, Craig, Alex, C.A. Thrillier, I think that's how you pronounce it, Callum, Scott and Mary the dog, Raymond, Sean, Andre, Northeast X-Wing, Orpheus, Old Dust, Diego and Andrew.
Mary the dog! Unless I can have a friend.
If you'd like to join our Patreon and help us make bigger and better videos, follow the link in the description or on our channel page.
For the first, slightly more advanced step in this tutorial, we've been dying to make this capey thing look cool, not that it doesn't already, so let's mix our brown-red mix again, this time adding a tiny bit of yellow just to warm things up a bit. Thin it nicely with water and paint streaks downwards, but only on the outermost parts. Totally avoid the recesses and don't be afraid of leaving plenty of that drab washed brown showing too. Now add some more yellow into that mix to create a final highlight colour and just catch the central parts of the areas you highlighted before. Again, with streaks that match the flowing direction of the fabric and being much more sparing than you were with the previous highlight. Now let's highlight the bone and the parchment. Mix a tiny bit of white into your khaki tan colour. Thin it with a little water, and using your detail brush, just pick out the raised, upward-facing areas of the purity seals and the forehead and cheekbones of the skull on the shield.
Next, I pulled out my red paint again and added a tiny touch of yellow to warm things up, and traced along one edge of the Inquisition symbol on the shield, and then stippled a little bit here and there to imply the slightly rough texture that's on it. While I had my yellow paint out, I also added a tiny dot of pure yellow to the centre of his eye sensor to give it a bit more visual interest. To make the gold pop a little more, I used straight gold paint and my detail brush to just catch little bits here and there. These areas will end up being the most shiny, so try to keep them quite subtle. Try to imagine where things might have been hit or handled a lot when you choose your highlight placement.
Finally, grab your detail brush and black wash to just add some very subtle panel lining to the most obvious ridges between the plates. If you get some on the surface by mistake, just quickly wipe it off with your finger and no one will even know. You can also use this black wash to recess shade the little pattern and emblem on the back of his cape too. And just to polish it off, use silver paint to very lightly dry brush the blade of the power sword. Have almost no paint on your brush at all, and almost buff it to a nice little shine. Ding!
And there we go. 53 minutes of hands-on painting time, and Gotfret de Montbard is ready to hack and slash his way through the Blackstone fortress. Now you can obviously use this method to paint your own model, or as an easy way of getting your basic paint job done nice and quick, leaving you more time to add any details you want later on. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you'd like to see more easy to follow painting tutorials, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. And we'll catch you next time. Bye for now.
Bye!